The most trusted and connected man in Utah.
Patrick Byrne from Overstock.com.
Thank you, Doug.
Doug Wright.
You know, there's a real libertarian streak at the heart of Utah. There's really a strong pro-freedom mentality.
The Doug Wright Show on KSL News Radio 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
And welcome back to our Democratic debate, the gubernatorial debate with Vaughn Cook and Michael Weinholz. And by the way, again, an invitation for those who would like to see the debate. You simply log on to kslnewsradio.com and then hit play, and you will be watching the debate live along with all of us. Let's get right back to the questions so we can address as many things as possible. And again, just a quick reminder, so many, if not almost all, of these questions did come from our KSL listeners and those who chose to send us a text or an email. This one will go to Mr. Cook. An extraordinary amount of time and money has been spent trying to transfer federal lands to Utah's control. As governor, would this be a priority for you? And specifically, what is your position on the lawsuits and the potential of lawsuits against the federal government over public lands? Mr. Cook.
Well, I think that it's an exercise in futility, frankly. I believe that we're spending too much money on frivolous lawsuits. I think the idea of taking control of all the federal lands in this state and managing them better is not going to happen for the state. The problem is this. We really can't afford to take them all. Let's assume that we owned all those lands and we had a fire that cost us $200-300 million to take care of. What would we do the next year? We would sell off a lot of that land just to pay for the fire. We don't want to be put in a position where we destroy the heritage for our descendants because we're looking for short-term gains. So it would not be a priority for me. It would be a priority for me to sit down with the federal government. If there are pieces of land that make more sense for the state to own, we should negotiate land swaps, or we should negotiate responsible transfers of that property. But the idea of taking the whole thing, I think, is just beyond reasonable.
Mr. Weinholz.
Well, this is another great example of our governor and legislators not listening to the people. The people are not in favor of this, and it's really a fool's errand. Our own state attorneys told us that this is an unwinnable case. So what did the legislature do? They went out and shopped until they found a law firm in Louisiana, of all places, that would give them the answer they wanted. And they spent $600,000 of taxpayer money to do that. And then they committed an additional $14 million for this lawsuit against the federal government, which is unwinnable. So it's a classic example of ideology run amok. This is only being pushed by a very small group of Republicans and largely by real estate developers and oil companies. They're the only people that are going to benefit from this sort of thing. And so everyday Utahns are not in favor of this. It's another example of our legislators not listening.
Mr. Cook.
The reason that the federal government owns so much land in this state is because back in the days when it was available for homesteading, it was not homesteadable. And so it was left in the hands of the federal government. We've now developed a tradition in this state of outdoor activity, outdoor beauty. My family and I have enjoyed that for our entire lives. And I think we want to think long and hard before we make any changes to that heritage. We don't want to deny access to federal lands. We don't want to stop the flow of tourists into this state because when they come in, the parks are full of dirty air and oil wells.
Mr. Weinholz.
Well, again, the people that are driving this are the people that want to benefit from it. The people of Utah are not going to benefit from this initiative. The great news is we own all this land now as Utahns and Americans. And when I talk to people in the areas that are going to be affected, they understand that they do much better when these lands are federally managed, and they are concerned about losing travel and tourism dollars if we go on this wild goose chase to develop these lands.
This question I'm going to attribute to Michael of Brigham City, who wrote to us and said, while some cities have taken this step already, California is the first state to adopt a statewide minimum wage of $15 to be fully implemented by 2022. What is your stand on the minimum wage, and should Utah follow California's lead? Mr. Weinholz.
Well, I believe we should. We have far too many Utahns that are struggling to get by. And in fact, we have over 265,000 Utahns who work for minimum wage. And these are working people, they're families. Very often, because the minimum wage is so low, they have to work 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet. And one of the things I've enjoyed about running for governor is talking to people and understanding how all of these things are connected. So if you're a parent and you're having to work 2 and 3 jobs, you don't have the opportunity to read to your children at night or take them to the museum and those sorts of things. So the children miss educational opportunities. Also, minimum wage jobs rarely have benefits. So you're always one illness or away from losing your home or those sorts of things. We have to have more living wage jobs, and promoting an increase in the minimum wage is one way to do that.
Mr. Cook, your response.
I remember when I was a young teenager and I worked for the city of Hiram. I was actually the caretaker at the cemetery. The minimum wage was $1.65 an hour. Minimum wage over the years has increased. As a business owner and someone who has started a business, 12 years ago when I started my business, I couldn't afford to pay $15 an hour. So I'm in favor of paying people more. We have to pay people more. But I think we have to have policies that are sensitive to the entrepreneurs who create jobs in the state. We don't want to put them out of business. We don't want to squash initiative because we create a burden that's too high for them to achieve. At the same time, now that I've been in business for 12 years, my company's profitable. We pay much higher wages than we did 12 years ago. So it's a balancing act. We can't have people working for a wage on which they can't support their family, but we need to have a responsible path to get there to keep businesses healthy as well.
And a rebuttal, Mr. Weinholz.
Well, we have to look at the big picture. Henry Ford was a proponent of paying his workers a high wage so that they could afford to buy his cars. So if we were to raise the minimum wage, it would benefit our economy greatly. There would be more money coming into the economy, more tax revenue. And unfortunately, though, the legislature a few years ago passed a law saying that Utah's minimum wage cannot exceed that of the federal government. This is a great example of why. Now tell me, how does that help everyday Utahns? It doesn't help everyday Utahns at all. It's a great example of Republicans not having everyday Utahns' interest at heart, and Democrats do.
Mr. Cook, to you, and I'll give you a little extra time on this one.
You know, I think you could roll into this minimum wage issue the immigration problem as well. Because I think a lot of times we get illegal immigrants who get taken advantage of by unscrupulous employers. And that has a downward pressure on everyone's income, including those who are here as legal aliens. So the issue is complex, and I know that all boats rise on the same tide. As we raise minimum wages, we put more money into circulation in this economy. That's a good thing. People need more money in their pockets to do the things that a lot of us in the state, I don't know that most of us, but a lot of us in the state just take for granted.
We have a related issue on a question that is coming up next, but at this point we'll take just a brief break. It is 11:17. Our Democratic gubernatorial debate will continue here at KSL News Radio.